Alex, people have come to the wrong place if they're looking for their questions answered about Shadow of Mordor.
Yeah, God damn it. Everyone knows that Monday show. We don't answer questions on the Friday show. What kind of fucking operation do you think we're running here?
Also, neither of us have played that video game.
I mean, I played it for like 20 minutes at E3, but yeah, that's probably not enough to actually answer any real questions about that game, is it?
No, no, it is
No.
not. No, it is not. But you know what? That game is getting some exceptionally good scores, sort of
Yes, it is.
across the board, and not just like, oh, it's a 8 out of 10. Like it's better than we expected. Like, you know, Phil Kohler, a guy whose reviews I like quite a bit, gave that game a 9.5, and it is getting sort of equivalent scores. Borderline the highest that various publications and their various scales can give it, at a lot of different places. And not only that, scores aside, just the rhetoric behind it is that it feels like the first next gen game, which is exciting.
I don't know. After Phil gave The Last of Us a 7.5, I'm not sure if I can ever trust him again about any opinion he ever holds.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm not gonna deny you that right.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, no, whatever. I love Phil, and it's seeing him gush over that game, and most impressively to me, seeing him and other reviewers talk about how that Nemesis system, basically the crux of what the whole game is built around, this idea of creating sort of like real-time rivalries and engagements with these various orc leaders and orc underlings throughout the game, and hearing that that system actually works the way they described it makes me want to finally I have the desire to play that game. It wasn't that that system didn't sound cool before, but it's the kind of thing that you could very easily see any developer say out loud and then have it turn out to be nowhere near what they were describing. Like that sounds exactly like the kind of thing that would not come to fruition the way they would hope. So seeing the stories that he talked about in his review about the encounters he had with characters in that game, that is kind of amazing that they were able to pull that off and pull it off well.
And man, I am a huge fan of video games that set aside buttons for like very particular, unique actions on behalf of the player. Like for example, I love that in the Metro series, there's a button dedicated to wiping off your visor. When
Right,
it gets
right.
dirty or there's blood on it. And in Shadow of Mordor, I guess when you go into stealth, if you press square, you kiss your wife. I don't know what the context of that is or why that is there, but it's that sort of attention to sort of detail that is I find really endearing and actually ends up going a long way to help me get into a world, especially when like Lord of the Rings, where I like it, but I am far from fanatical about it, and in many ways have long grown tired of it. So
Yeah,
I think that has definitely been part of the maybe not cynicism, but ambivalence towards this game,
sure.
or trepidation to it truly being something great. Not only because it's a licensed game, but because we've played a lot of crappy Lord of the Rings games,
Oh
and
yeah.
we have had a series of crappy Lord of the Rings movies in the past couple of years, and so just like generally speaking, I'm just sort of tired on the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, I'm as burned out on the Lord of the Rings stuff as anybody. Like, after seeing that first Hobbit movie, I'm like, I don't want to watch the rest of the Hobbit movies. I don't care if they get better. I'm
I
not
love The
interested enough
Hobbit.
in.
You know how angry that makes me that I don't want to see another Hobbit movie? Because I love The Hobbit. It's better than Lord of the Rings.
I, I have no opinion on that one way or the other, so I cannot challenge that at all. All I can say is that the last thing in the world I ever expected to want to do is play a Lord of the Rings video game, and yet here I am. I know Brad's been playing it. I don't know how far along he is. So and anyone who might be asking when our review is coming, don't know. There's a whole weekend. He'll probably spend some time with it. I have no idea what he thinks of it, so I'm not going to speak for him. But reading the reactions from around the World Wide Web, I'm very excited about it.
I can speak from based on our brief experience on AM talking about it because I was trying to figure out ahead of these reviews how I should be mentally categorizing when and if I should play this game. Was it one of those games that's going to come in like a 7, for a
Yeah,
10-point scale? And it's like, okay, it's probably flawed but interesting. but I can kind of shovel it off for a couple of weeks, maybe like late October when I've gotten through some of the other stuff that's coming out. But he's pretty early, but his impressions were positive. And the one thing he did say that was echoed in a lot of the reviews was, I think ourselves as critics or writers or whatever, and the audience has certainly started to become a little more rightfully cynical about really good game demos that show up at like an E3 or a Gamescom or a PAX. I think Alien. What's the subtitle for that Gearbox one? I've like removed it from my brain.
Colonial Marines.
Yeah, Colonial Marines. That's like sort of ground zero for this backlash against sort of like tightly scripted, like man, this looks great, but wait a minute, if it looks so good, it's probably terrible. And I think Shadow of Mordor started scratching that itch for me a little bit of that Nemesis system demoed so exceptionally well and sounded so cool that I could, I was fighting the urge to try not to be cynical, but fighting the urge to think, oh, well, it's probably repetitive and boring in the real game.
Yeah, and I mean, again, this is, the first attempt by this developer to make a game within this franchise, within this kind of framework, so there were reasons to be, to suspect that it might not work out, but, by all accounts, it sounds like it has, so I will play it. I will play a fucking Lord of the Rings game, and, hopefully I'll end up enjoying it.
Yeah, so it is definitely on my list. I forgot Alien Isolation showing up hopefully today.
Ooh.
Hopefully that shows up today. I'm intending to review that. So yeah, I'm winding down on Danganronpa 2. I've been sneaking in a lot of time with that. I mostly traveled on Tuesday, getting back from going West Coast to East Coast. Alex is just the fucking worst. It's just
kind of sucks, right?
It doesn't matter how early you leave, you lose your entire day in the process.
Yep.
You get to the airport at 6 a.m. and then I don't get home till 5:30. I don't know where the entire day went, but I spent a lot of that kind of chugging through Danganronpa 2, and then I've been spending my evenings when we're catching up on TV shows like The Strain, in which I don't really have to be paying total attention to what's going on. Kind of
I haven't
through that.
I haven't been watching The Strain. My impression of it is it's a lot of very silly effects and horrible storytelling, but there's something maybe slightly captivating about the fact that it is just kind of a trashy horror show.
Yeah, it's campy. When the effects can be good, but it's a TV show, so it's the budget means that sort of the set piece stuff looks incredible and has a Guillermo del Toro flair. But he's a producer on this, and yeah, the writing is not, the acting is not. It's
not good.
Yeah, it's not good. Anytime it gets into sort of like the lore building, it's better than what's happening in the real world. Like, and watching, this is often the case. They have to contrive sequences for characters to do things that don't make a lot of sense, because otherwise things would probably get wrapped up way too quickly.
Right. But they can't make a series out of something that would be done in about 3 or 4 episodes otherwise.
Yeah, which is why I often miniseries are often better for stuff like that. But it is a regular television show, and in any case, it's all right. It's, in terms of what's on Sunday nights, it's better than The Walking Dead, but that's a low bar. That's not a great level of comparison.
When was the last time you actually watched The Walking Dead? I checked out midway through season 3.
No, I sort of caught up season 4, like when they were doing a marathon in between their, like, they break the season in 2 chunks. So my wife and I just kind of flicked it on a Sunday. Back when I had Sundays where I could do things other than just watch football.
Right.
And
yeah, you mean that one half of the year where there is no football.
Yeah, and those were the days when I could just kind of scrub through a show, and I got up through, I don't know, most of the season, and then I don't know, for some reason we stopped watching, and I feel no shame about it. But I was like 3 episodes away from finishing that season, so I might just finish it just so I can say I did, but that seems stupid.
Yeah, that's fair. I've had no reason to go back. I heard that parts of season 4 started to pick it up a little bit. But not enough. That was not enough to make me want to jump back in. Like, season 2 of that show was such a shit show. The beginning of season 3 was such a shit show. I'd see no reason to go back.
No, no, it's yeah, it's boring.
Yes.
That is my ultimate criticism of that show, that I find it incredibly boring, and
Yeah.
I don't care about any of the characters except Daryl. So if you don't want to just make it like an all Daryl show, just like Daryl on his own, just like a solo show, I'd probably be okay with that.
Well, then, do I ever have a video game for you? It's called The Walking Dead Survival
Right.
Instinct. You
All
should
right,
definitely
all
play
right,
that.
all right. Well, I'd rather play Silent Hills. I'll just play this Walking Dead spin-off where Daryl leaves the group and then just
And then some
finds
really weird
himself.
shit starts happening.
Yeah, yeah, I can think of that in canon. That's fine with me. So yeah, so I'm kind of digging through that because like I'm starting to get like heart palpitations over the amount of games that are coming out like very
Oh yeah.
soon, and the amount of games that people are excited about, because I'm trying to finish off Danganronpa 2, which I probably have like 4 or 5 hours left. Game is split into 5 chapters. I'm in the back half of chapter 4. Um, Still really enjoying it. Not much else to say. I'll probably write a review sometime early next week, for that, because I'd like to get something up on the site about it, and
Cool.
continue my reign as anime editor 2.0,
Mm.
by playing these games. You've got another game that either just come out or comes out next week. I'm not entirely sure, but the Vanishing of Ethan Carter.
Yeah, so it was supposed to come out this week, I think, and then they got right up to the wire on their Steam page, like the countdown was there, and they said, "Hey guys, there's stuff we still need to fix in this game, so we're going to push it back a little bit."
Okay.
Which is unfortunate, but it sounds like it will, in fact, be coming out, I think, next week.
Yeah, I know reviewers have it, and it's yeah, I don't know. The folks that have played it have given it high recommendations. Steve Gaynor on Twitter immediately added me once he started playing and said, "Hey, I know that one of the first conversations we ever had in person was a deep mutual admiration for super high-res textures." And we're not just talking like high-res wood textures. We're talking when you pick up a book, when you look at a poster, you can read everything on it. I love that shit in video games.
So
And
I'm high. It's out now.
oh, okay.
It came out yesterday. It did actually make it out yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I was thinking of a different game. I don't know.
And apparently this game has high-res textures up the ass.
Ooh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, that game sounded really cool to me. I'm very interested in playing it. It's only weird to me, and this is a complete weird aside for myself, but there is a professional wrestler named Ethan Carter the third. So when that game was announced, that sort of put like a weird association in my brain. And then he started tweeting about how he had vanished on his feed, and that just made everything really confusing.
Yeah, that sounds truly. I don't know how you get through life, Alex.
Yeah, because I can't deal with anything ever.
uh, one of the I've had this Tumblr blog idea scratching in the back of my head, and the reason it's stayed in the back of my head is because I don't have time to pull it off. But I'd
Mhm.
love it if someone did. If someone wants to do this, they should run with it, and that's fine. Just give me credit when you become rich off of a Tumblr blog. Is one of my favorite things to do in video games is, or even in movies, just like specifically in movies and games, because it's primarily where it exists, is to walk around the world and look at like the fake movie posters that
Mm.
are strewn about, because often they're just really goofy. Sometimes they're really good, sometimes they're really bad. They don't. That's most of the time they're really bad, but they're always really interesting because they're often takes on movies that are out or parodies. I don't know. I always find it very fun to watch how developers fill their world when they are clearly not in a situation to like license a bunch of actual stuff to put
Yeah.
in there.
No,
And
I love that material. Like when we were seeing Firewatch, one of my favorite things that they showed was like all the like book covers and other like little designs and things that Ollie Moss had made, like the product design stuff that he was doing in that game. I love exploring anytime anytime anyone actually does stuff with that, like when they actually go out of their way to make like a variety of those kinds of things. I love taking the time to look around and explore that stuff.
yeah, so I always thought that like, I follow a bunch of weird video game tumblers, such as like food in video games and buildings in video games. I don't think that's actually what they're called, but it's very. I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually what they're called too. But it's just basically they're just tumblers that point out like very hyper specific elements of games, and then like either do an analysis or just kind of link you to where they're from. I find stuff like that
Wasn't there
fascinating.
one that was like video game foliage?
Yeah, I did an interview with the guy
Yeah, that's
about
right.
on the site about it. And I think there would be probably some. I bet there are cool stories behind some of the ones that actually get made too.
Yeah.
Maybe I should. Maybe I'll file that one away. That might be an interesting story to do sometime. So in any
Yeah.
case, doing that, and then I dived back into Destiny last night. I've got a story going up on Sunday, um, in which I articulate this. Like I feel like I'm missing out because I don't
Hmm.
have time for Destiny. Like I feel like that game is passing me by, and not in the way that like it goes into your backlog, but in the way that all my friends are talking about it, and it stresses me out that I've had real life stuff getting in the way of me playing it because I have enjoyed a lot of it, and it sucks to miss out on events like the Loot Cave. Not because I'm super psyched about exploits, but just because everyone was talking about it, and now it's gone. I will never see what it is, and that bums me out.
The loot cave was the thing that it seemed like people I know who were playing Destiny were like the most excited about. So the fact that they immediately took that out as soon as they could leads me to believe that Bungie actually has no idea why anyone enjoys their game.
No,
Um,
I
I
think the excitement for the loot cave
I'm
is
exaggerating.
okay. Because I say you could look at the loot cave and say, and this is what I try to articulate in the story that's going live on Sunday is that it both shows the genius of what Destiny is trying to accomplish, or the potential genius of what Destiny is trying to accomplish, and also um, the problems to it. So the problems inherent to it are that people aren't satisfied with how the loot works, and that the only way to feel satisfied with the loot drops is to exploit sections of the game, which underscores that that game needs to rebalance itself in some pretty fundamental ways. But what it does show is that people didn't want to miss out on that. Like people want to be part of moments that disappear. Like the loot cave was a temporary moment in time in which the community was all kind of doing something together, and then it turned into a meme and blah 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 blah, and that's gone forever. You cannot
Yeah.
replicate the loot cave, and that's what I think Bungie is going for in many ways with the design of Destiny, is trying to create this tension where the player wants to keep going back into the world because they have a fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And it's that's the worst expressed, in the form of a loot cave, but is best expressed in public events and other things that they're putting together that come into the world and then leave. And the idea of trying to get players to come back and engage with events that will never be there again if you pick up the game 3 months from now, or you're taking a 2-week break from the game. And part of what I go into in the story is the stress, not only of missing out on that because of real life stuff, but just it kind of sucks to be, I like games. A lot of the games I play are static. They're single player games in which whenever I get into them, they're going to be the same as they were when other people played them, and that's just not true of Destiny.
Yeah, it's not. And Chris Tilton makes an excellent point in the chat here. He says it's less about the loot cave and more about how Bungie didn't make any actual fun in the game, so we have to invent it ourselves. Like we're 10 years old and have no car. And I think that's sort of true to my experience, which is that the most fun I've had in Destiny has been the most unstructured stuff. It's been going around with friends, maybe doing some of those the whatever those random missions you do that are not
Patrols.
the patrols, yeah. And some of the crazy shit that happens when you have a good group of friends and you're doing a fire team. Uh, but it's like the actual structure of the game is still incredibly draining to me. It's not that much fun to just go in and do those missions and just come back out and then do more of those missions. Like I've never had a ton of fun playing Destiny, which is why I fell behind in it, and why I'm having a very hard time getting inspired to go back to it, because I'm already well behind where nearly all of my friends are level wise, which means that I'd have to find some other people who are lower level to play with to have any fun with it at all. Because as a single player game, it's terrible, um, or just give up. And right now, I'm kind of leaning toward just giving up because I've already sunk like 12 hours into that game, and I think that's enough for me to say I've seen what the basics of what it has to offer are. I'd rather play something else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But even if Chris Tilton points out that we got to look for the fun ourselves, you're all still playing the game,
A
and
lot of them are, yes.
I think that says something about that there's something there, and it's not just that well you paid $60 for it, so you got to feel like you're getting your time out of it. Maybe that's true for some people, but I think for a lot of
Yeah,
people, it's actually that there's something there that's drawing them to it, and that Bungie just hasn't quite gotten enough out of that. But that there is something there,
yeah,
and this may not have quite hit the nail on the head, but that there's potential there, and I'll be curious to see how much it evolves over the course of its life. So anyway, I thought that was worth pointing
yeah.
out. Did you have you played anything else this week?
So this week was spent trying to get ready to do an unfinished video for Civilization Beyond Earth, which I had a preview build. It was a build that sort of maxed out at 250 turns, but it gave me a pretty good understanding of what the early game stuff for that is going to be. There's a video going up probably just shortly after this show will be over. But I can talk about it a little bit if you have any particular questions about it or just kind of want to know what it is.
So I have not played a Civilization game since, let's say, Civ 2. I don't know,
Okay.
a long time. So I'm not in a position to ask any informed questions. But this game does come out pretty soon, right? Like sometime.
It's end of October.
Yeah.
It's October 24th, I think.
This fall. And
Yeah.
how you've played a lot of these, you like these a lot. You've reviewed them. You and Ryan are probably the chief Civilization experts at Giant Bomb. Like, would this be the one you recommend that I just kind of jump into if I want to know what's going on in Civilization? Because I do want to know. So many people that I like and respect enjoy the hell out of this series, and it seems like one I could probably get into. I've never played one, so it's a lot easier to go, I don't want that.
Let me just clarify one point.
Uh-huh.
I was not into Civilization until Civilization 5. Or actually, Civ Rev was the first one I ever played, the one for like Xbox. But
yeah.
Civ 5 was the first one I really sunk any time into. That did cause me to go back and play Civs 4 and 3 a little bit, and I do like those games a lot. But 5 was kind of my entry point, so I don't have the long history with it that like Ryan did.
Okay.
But for me, so Civ 5 was an incredibly easy game for me to get into. Like, it took a while for me to really understand the strategy of it and figure out how to succeed in it. But the basics of how to play it were very easy to get into. And Civ, I mean, for all intents and purposes, Beyond Earth is Civ 5 in most of the key ways. It follows a very similar progression, has similar pace to it. A lot of the unit design and a lot of the core mechanics of it feel very similar to Civ 5. But it's also not just a reskin to make it sci-fi. They've redone their technology tree into this very elaborate web that lets you kind of, and they've also added this concept of disciplines, which tie into the kinds of bonuses you get, the kinds of units you can use on the ground, all sorts of different stuff. Those three, I mean, again, the premise is you're settling on an alien world. It's the far-flung future. You're colonizing an alien world, and there are other civs out there that are doing the same thing. When you're on that alien world, the three disciplines are you can choose purity, which is to completely retain your humanity, defend your outpost to the utmost so that no alien life can infiltrate it, and basically just try and keep the vestiges of humanity that you have. There's the harmony one, which you can use to research the alien life forms and the alien fauna and all that stuff, and turn your civilization into something that's a little bit more of a hybrid of the existing world and your own humanity. And then there's the supremacy one, which is a straight-up transhumanism, like cyborgs, robots, all that kind of shit. The previous games didn't have that kind of specificity, and you weren't like earning points toward certain disciplines. You could kind of develop all the technologies, and that was fine. Here, you can't really do that. There's enough text on the web where it according to them at least. Again, I couldn't get far enough into the late game to really see this for certain, but they're saying that like if you try to develop all the technologies or just try to develop a little bit of everything, you're not really going to get there because you need to have that focus. So that adds kind of a different element to the strategy of playing the game. But fundamentally, it is Civilization. You were building settlements. You were building soldiers and other military units. You were building a lot of buildings. You're doing diplomacy with other civs. You're fighting off bug aliens instead of barbarians. It's that same idea, but it has been made in a way that is actually very cool looking. It's not just it's not just a skin. Like the development of the game, the way your civilizations kind of morph depending on your discipline is really really cool. And I actually found myself losing way more hours to that limited demo than I thought I would.
So describe to me the first. Why did you get into Civ with 5? Just because you were like, this seems like a thing I'd like, or?
Yeah, I'd heard Ryan talk enough about it to where I figured I should give it a shot. And I gave it a shot, and I lost terribly in my first couple of games. But I didn't care, because I found that even in the act of losing early on, I was still having a ton of fun with it. The core gameplay of adding more territory, building more things, just constantly trying to outrace your opponents to build the greatest civilization is really addictive, and it's really fun. And eventually I got to the point where losing was not as much fun, but early on, just kind of learning the mechanics and getting the basics of it, I loved it. And this scratches that same itch very much so. It has just pace-wise and gameplay-wise, it's hitting all the same spots that Civ 5 did for me.
And what kind of sci-fi does this pull from? Like, do you feel like it's a certain era or like a certain aesthetic? Or...
I mean, it's pulling from a lot of different places. Like the alien worlds are fairly varied map-wise from what I've seen. The aliens themselves, you could probably pull a little bit of Starship Troopers in there, but then there were also these giant sandworms that are very hard to stop. So there's a bunch of different stuff there. The actual aesthetics, I would say it pulls from any number of different places. Like there are space marines in the game. But then, I don't know. I can't pick a specific source for it. It just looks like they took a lot of sci-fi elements and just said, let's just develop as many of these as we can into our own thing.
All right. I feel like I should give this a shot. I remember the only memory I have of, I don't know why, I'm pretty sure I bought, I want to say it was Civ 2, which I think was the one that came out on Windows 95. And the reason I bought it was basically the way I bought games pre modern internet, when I was on AOL, was my PC Gamer subscription was my Bible, because every month it came with a demo disc, and it was like a religious experience every month to get that demo disc. It was so much fun because maybe demos existed and you could get shareware versions off of BBSs and things like that, but it was so slow. I was not really aware of things like that, and as games got bigger and they were forced to put them on CDs, it was just not it was kind of unwieldy to download things on a 56K modem. But
sure,
I remember I want to say it's Civ 2, and I might be wrong on this. Either way, whatever Civ it was, got just the most ridiculous score on PC Gamer, like a 98%, just incredibly high. So I just bought it because, well, man, that seems like a good game. They gave it a high score, and the manual I couldn't get past it. I couldn't. It was like a 300-page manual. It was so thick. It was just so dense, which was really appealing at first, until then I actually started reading it. And tutorials back then were not what they are now. A lot of games back then put a lot more on the player to discover what was happening, especially based on what was explained in manuals. So I kind of got a bad experience with it. It just was overwhelming for 12-year-old Patrick or whatever it is that I was playing it. But the fact that you were able to get into it with Civ 5, and I loved XCOM. Never played an XCOM before. I mean, I know that modern XCOM is different than the older games, but nonetheless, it seems like a series that I could get into. I just need to give it a proper chance.
The only thing I kind of miss in this one is that part of the fun of Civ 5 for me was having all the different world cultures in there, and just kind of seeing what their translations of that stuff was. Like having Gandhi be a weird nuclear arms crazed psychopath was sort of an odd choice, and that kind of stuff. There's only 8 civilizations in the game, and their personalities are not as distinct. So it's not it kind of loses a little something in that, I think. But the gameplay is still incredibly good, at least from what I've played. What I'd say, watch some of the unfinished video. Just kind of get a sense of how it starts early on in the game, and I feel like you'll get a sense of whether that's something you would find fun or not.
Yeah. Well, it comes out late October, so
Yep.
hopefully it's pre-Dragon Age. I'm not going to play any of the driving or sports games that come out in October. If I get Alien early, that means I finish that. Evil Within comes out on the 14th. So I'm hoping I can keep pace. October is going to be rough. It'd be
It is.
Shadow of Mordor, Evil Within, and Alien Isolation. Oof. It's a lot of games.
A lot of games
Very
coming.
exciting though. Lots of stuff going on. I still haven't played D4, and then.
Oh, you got to do that.
Harder. I know. But it is. If you play more than 2 games at once, you will then end up leaving a game behind. And
Right.
Like Danganronpa is my when I'm doing other stuff game, and then Destiny is my like when I'm sitting down to play a game.
Right.
And if I do any more than that, then I at least in Destiny want to get through the story stuff. I just unlocked Mars, which means I'm on the final planet, I believe, for the missions in that game. And I'm in the final throes of Danganronpa, so I'm in the middle of putting both of those to bed, which will then open me up for Alien and something else. And then it's like once you beat Destiny and then hit the level cap, like it's a game that I can, just revisit, much more briefly because I'm just going to log in and play a strike or something like that. It's the onus is less burdenful now that I've cruised through a lot of the sort of the main content. It's going to feel like, hey, I've got a sense of this game for my Game of the Year discussions, and I'll worry about the rest of the stuff later. But so that unfinished is going up today, right?
Yeah, that video is going up in a little bit. It's funny you mentioned stuff coming out in October. Like Vinny and I were sort of just sitting around kicking around like what our Game of the Year choices would even be at this point, and I realized that my list as it exists right now is pretty thin. So it's, I guess, a good thing that a bunch of stuff is going to be coming out, over the next several weeks, because right now there's like, if I had to pick a Game of the Year at the moment, it would be fucking jazz punk. And I'm not saying I don't like jazz punk, and I don't think jazz punk should be high on anyone's list, but that's sort of crazy to me.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine now. There's a lot of good stuff on here, but yeah, I know
There's a lot of good stuff, but there's not like a ton of standout games,
Yeah, I can't put Spelunky at number 1, although maybe I'll pull it.
That could be your 2012 game of 2014.
It comes out on PS4 this year, I think. So does that fit within our definitions? I'm not sure. I think that's
close enough.
Close enough. All right, well, let's talk about some news. There was some stuff that happened this week. Probably some of those interesting stuff happened on Steam this week, in which they unveiled a new front page and like a blue tinted look that has been part of the beta if you opt into that stuff, but is now, I think, for everyone. But more importantly, Valve is now trying to address its discoverability issues. As once Steam introduced the Greenlight program, in which it was a lot easier for smaller developers to find a way into the service, but was mostly just a half step before Steam goes in its inevitable app store direction of anything can go on the service. At some point it's going to not make sense to keep curating things when you're letting so much in. So you might as well just let the system do its work. But once you've gone to an app store model, the problem that even Apple and Google both have not managed to address particularly meaningfully is how do you point people in the direction of the good stuff? And if you think about one of the roles that we have, why we start websites, is that we act as curators. Whether that's that involves a lot of things. Whether it's just playing games and giving recommendations, whether it's reviews, whether it's whatever. Like a lot of what we act as is a filter for people, in which we're given the privilege of playing a lot of games all year long in the hopes of entertainment, but also being able to allow people to funnel their experience into exactly what they want, rather than having to spend time with everything. And for, I imagine, a significant chunk of, or at least a chunk of Steam's audience, they don't go to maybe a lot of websites. The way people consume content and curation recommendations is changing. Part of that's happening on YouTube, and I think it's smart for Valve to introduce a curation program onto Steam. So basically, what that allows is we're setting up one of our own, or we're hijacking. I'm not sure. Anyway,
So we have a staff list that Jeff made.
Okay, all right. So we have one. There have been other ones that have been started by the community, but we're in the midst of setting up one for ourselves, and maybe we'll do personal lists. I've thought about doing one for like worth playing or independent games or stuff like that. But in any case, what it more broadly speaking does is allows individuals, it allows groups, it allows websites, what have you, whatever collection or individualist you would have, to set up a personalized storefront. That is the games that they recommend that are coming on Steam. And that is in collaboration with other elements of Steam that now try to give you recommendations based on what you've played, how long you've played it, games you've liked or have in your wish list. And all that seems to be trying to come together to make Steam a more personalized experience.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. I will say that I am starting to have, and perhaps this is unreasonable, but I'm starting to have an extremely hostile reaction to the word curator because it is being badly misused in a lot of different contexts. This is one context where I don't think it's being misused. I think this is actually, the correct use of it, and also the system itself seems like a good idea. But on quite literally the same day that that system went up and became live, I got an email invite from EA for an event where they were pitching me on coming and seeing a bunch of curated demos of their holiday games, which just kind of made me want to throw whatever was in my hand through a wall. So yeah, like I'm having that unreasonable reaction to this system that actually sounds like a really good idea and something that could, like you said, very easily help certain segments of the audience figure out how to kind of sift through some of the chaff that's in the Steam marketplace these days. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of fucking chaff. As this summer, setting up Giant Beast has taught me, and as we're trying to figure out games to quick look, there's a lot of really weird, fucked up shit on Steam right now.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see. One of the questions raised about the curation system is the integrity of the process and the recommendations, without specifically shaming anyone in particular. It has already been discovered that in the Giant Bomb one that has been set up, a developer messaging us through that and offering codes for a game, saying they would love to be highlighted on our curator page, which that's really no different than getting an email with codes and saying we'd love for coverage on your site. That's really not that much different. But I think it is going to set up, especially with, a lot of the curated lists that are popular right now come from a lot of popular YouTube personalities or writers, or however you want to actually classify it. And one of the conversations that's been happening, in those communities is sponsored content, and
right.
So how that moves over to what you recommend as a curator. Steam doesn't, with the curation program, like, it's not like Amazon, right, where you have you get a cut of the games you're recommending. I don't think so. Right?
No,
that's not.
True. I don't think that's the case at all. But
but it makes me wonder if they would potentially go in a direction like that down the line, where curators would not only be people who are providing recommendations, but that given that if you look at what someone like Total Biscuit can do, if he highlights a game, if PewDiePie highlights a game, it does ensure sales, right? Like, it's through sheer exposure, it does result in a spike in sales for games. So I wonder if there would be a potential at some point where that became sort of a participatory revenue stream, because it is literally on a storefront. It is not just on your YouTube page. It is, they have that on Amazon theoretically, where the websites will, when they link to products, will link to their, the one where if you buy it through, they get, a couple cents or however it works out. But I wonder if that would be something they would consider later. But it seems like the waters get really muddy pretty quickly there.
Very, very muddy. Yeah, I kind of hope it doesn't go in that direction, because that to me negates the usefulness of relying on someone else's list. Like, if that's even a factor in that kind of stuff, like, I wouldn't want to trust that system at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's slightly different when it's actually a storefront in which the clicking of the link is not just to see your thoughts, it is actually on the system in which you can then purchase that product.
Yeah, yeah. But we'll see how it goes. As it exists right now, I think it's an interesting system, and we'll see where it develops.
Yeah, I hardly see any downside to it because one of the things that people have been most upset about Steam as it has allowed more and more products on there is that the front page has become more and more useless. There are just dozens and dozens of games that sometimes come out on any given day, and figuring out exactly what's interesting used to be just a measure of what is on the front page. Valve used to act as the curator, right? So this is essentially what they're doing,
Yeah.
is passing off their job to the community.
Well, not entirely, but they're basically they're definitely shifting a lot of the weight in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, not to say that the front page of Steam won't be curated still, but its usefulness has deteriorated. And because there's so much now available, the data just can't be personalized in a way that is useful to as many people as it used to be. It used to be you go to the front page and like the most interesting stuff on Steam was right there, and now that is just not the case. And it makes sense that they would distribute that a little wider. That's just kind of they're using their community to leverage that, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's a good move, and I would love, one of the things I hear all the time is like, there's no good games on the App Store, which is like patently untrue. But finding that stuff is really difficult and a pain in the ass. I would love it if the App Store got something similar to this. I would love to have an App Store curation storefront where I could point people to this. Hey, you just got a new iPhone 6, you just got a new iPad. Here is the coolest shit that you can get for this. There's a lot of really interesting games that you could be playing right now. Here's where to get them, as opposed to, I don't know, sift through the top selling charts and get through a bunch of free-to-play junk.
Yeah, here are all these hot, really interesting, really, independent games like Clash of Clans.
Yeah, exactly. And then I get my free-to-play cut, and it all works out.
Yeah, the system works.
They announced Ollie 2, Welcome to Hollywood.
Yes!
I still
That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. Did you watch the trailer?
I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I saw that you put that up, and I let out a very hearty "yeah" in the middle of the office yesterday, to which Lydia, our coworker, just kind of looked at me and went like, "What? What are you doing?" It's like this indie skateboarding game I really like. They made a sequel, and that's like the dorkiest fucking response to that question you could possibly have.
Yeah, that's pretty bad, or pretty good, depending on the case may be. Yes, the sequel has combo linking manuals and reverts, which that sounds a lot like Tony Hawk.
Yeah, it does. But Jeff and I go back and forth on this a whole lot, whether Tony Hawk 2 or Tony Hawk 3 is the superior Tony Hawk. I would concede that Tony Hawk 3 is probably the best playing of the series, but 2 is still my favorite. Jeff's argument will always be that reverts fundamentally change the game in the best way possible, so I imagine that is something that he is very excited about.
I just wonder when that stuff gets too complicated that it sort of defeats the, that's sort of just how that stuff goes. It's always in, with a sequel, there's always more, and I think I might. So you fall on the level of Tony Hawk 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I appreciated the additional level of control and finesse that you had, to continue to link combos and things like that in 3, but I liked the purity. Like 2 was the sweet spot in between the lack of control you felt once you'd invested a bunch of hours into Tony Hawk 1, and then it just started to become a little much for me in 3.
3 is the one I can always go back to when I'm totally cool to throw in that extra level of concentration that doing the revert stuff requires. But 2 is the one I can go back to anytime, anywhere, forever, because just everything about it, the course design, the gameplay, the soundtrack, just all of it fits together in just the most perfect way for me. It's also the one I spent the most time with, so naturally I kind of fall toward that one regardless. But it's definitely the one that just that was the game that got me into Tony Hawk. And granted, being into Tony Hawk became a case of increasingly diminishing returns with everything after 4. But that said, I had a hell of a lot of fun with that series between like 2 and 4, and even like I think what was it the first Tony, was it Underground was the one that came after 4?
Sure.
Yeah, whatever the first one of those I thought was really good, and then everything after that I forgot about.
I do kind of hold a slight grudge against the Tony Hawk series because my first. So Tony Hawk came out around the same time as Thrasher Skate and Destroy, which
Yes.
was an excellent skating game that Rockstar put out. Like they're not, it's like the part of the library that no one really remembers, but I think was it pre GTA 3, post GTA 3. I'm not
3.
I'm not
3 was.
sure.
I want to say it was very, very closely post GTA 3.
Probably was. In any case, basically, like Thrasher was to Tony Hawk what Skate became to Tony Hawk eventually,
Yeah.
which is to say that Thrasher was way less interested in rewarding you for just kind of goofing around. Not to say that Tony Hawk didn't require skill, but it was very much, a heightened sense of reality in which, like, it was about, doing ridiculous stunts and pulling off crazy combos, whereas Thrasher, like Skate, was more about pulling off, like getting like a kickflip off was impressive. Like
Right.
doing simple tricks were meant to get closer to the reality of just doing a trick with a skateboard in real life was impressive all on its own. And I just remember my friends and I got super into Thrasher Skate and Destroy because really like the controls, had an incredible soundtrack.
It did.
That for my young self introduced me to a lot of hip hop that I was not aware of. So I have Thrasher Skate and Destroy to thank for that. And it just bummed me out because Tony Hawk basically killed it.
It did.
Tony Hawk was the flashier, more fun game, and it just took off, and there was really no reason to compete against it. And Tony Hawk then ended up creating a backlash against itself that allowed a game like Thrasher Skate and Destroy to have a market by saying, "Hey, don't you want something that takes us a little more seriously?"
At the time, the answer was apparently no.
No. Well, yeah, it was definitely not. And but God, well, because Tony Hawk really set off that whole extreme, sports movement with a lot of those games in that era. But man, Thrasher Skate and Destroy, that game probably doesn't hold up at all, but I loved that game at the time. I loved it.
Yeah, it was a good game. It was pretty all right. I never got super into it. Despite the fact that at one point I even had a Thrasher magazine subscription. But the game, for me, it was Tony Hawk because I like the more arcadey side of it. It's actually kind of creepy how right I was about Tony Hawk 3 being just barely post GTA 3 because they came out literally a week apart.
Okay, I thought so. Or at least I knew they were close.
Yeah, they both came out in late October of 2001. So
crazy.
That was a hell of a year for the PlayStation 2.
PlayStation 1. Wait, Thrasher was PS1, 2. Wasn't it? Thrasher. No.
Wait, Thrasher? I said Tony Hawk 3.
Oh, Tony Hawk 3.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thrasher was PlayStation 1.
You're right about that.
Yeah. Do you see that stuff about Blizzard officially canceling Titan after 7 years of development?
I did, and I read the original story about the cancellation. I read Jason Schreier's piece on Kotaku about what that game was supposed to be. Sounds really interesting.
Basically Jason's reporting suggested it was a kind of a, not superhero is the wrong word, but like the idea of a superhero, like someone that during the day, does sort of a normal crap. Like Superman, during the day, he's a newspaper reporter, and then at night, he's Superman. And they were kind of taking that approach to the game design, at least in the form that Jason reported on, in which during the day you were maybe like a crafter or something like that. And then at night you went on raids and you went on quests. And the two of them, those two dynamics were kind of playing off each other in a like post-apocalyptic Earth, or like an Earth after an alien invasion that was successfully defended off, which explains why there's all sorts of crazy technology and stuff like that available to um, to the world. But yeah, 7 years in, they have officially put that game on the shelf. And the thing, and it's always blew my mind about people that get into game development, and I have an immense amount of respect for it. And maybe I'd understand it more or could see myself doing it if I was actually doing it. But the idea that you could work on something for 7 years and have nothing to show for it. I mean, it's not nothing, right? You have experience, it probably carries on in the next projects, blah, 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 blah. But like to not have a shipped product to show for those 7 years, that sound like to have nearly a decade of your life without like a shipped game to show for it, just
Yeah, it's totally crazy. It's insane, and you realize also that there aren't very many companies that could get away with doing something like that. Most companies would not invest that kind of capital, that kind of manpower, that kind of just effort into a game for that long, only to finally cancel it. Like most companies would be like, we have to ship something because we have spent this much on it, and we need to make this back. Blizzard is one of the few companies that is in that rarefied position. So it's fascinating to me that they were able to do this and justify the fact that we can no longer work on this. Obviously, they have enough going right now between the continued, I mean, still somewhat dwindling, but still fairly strong overall fan base of World of Warcraft. The strong surge of Hearthstone over the last year. They got plenty going on, so they can actually afford to do that, which is crazy. But the game itself did sound kind of cool. Like, I don't know if it was a game I would have gotten super into, but I liked the concept of it. And given that World of Warcraft was one of the only MMOs I ever spent any considerable amount of time playing, I trust that they might have been able to make something really fun out of that. I guess in the
yeah. I
end, they
mean,
just...
yeah. I mean, you would imagine elements of Titan end up elsewhere or get spun off and kind of made into their own things. It's never the case that all of that stuff gets thrown out.
Right.
It's not.
Those ideas will find their way into other games at some point.
Yeah, yeah. And and part of what's unique about Titan is that they talked about it, right?
Yeah.
Is it's probably not uncommon for Valve, let's say, a company that every once in a while we hear about various projects they had in development that never make it out of pre-production or get canceled in production. Lots of games that have maybe been in development, maybe not for 7 years, but for significant periods of time, we just never hear about. And Blizzard is just one of those companies that, for years ahead of Diablo 3 going to consoles, they talked about how they wanted to put Diablo on consoles. They just hadn't quite figured out how to make it work, and eventually they did, and then dipped. And with Titan, they talked about how they were making a successor to World of Warcraft that wasn't World of Warcraft 2, and it didn't work out. Of course, it's interesting to see there was a quote floating around a couple of weeks back, I think, in which Blizzard said they were open to the idea of World of Warcraft 2, and then not long after that, we hear that they are scrapping Project Titan. Not to say that immediately means, hey, we're getting World of Warcraft 2, but I wonder if it does signal maybe that Blizzard will never again produce an original AAA project in the scope of a World of Warcraft or a Diablo or a StarCraft. Like there will be sequels to those games
and spin-offs,
but the idea of a wholly original intellectual property from Blizzard on the scale of those games, like it seems more likely they'll work from small to big, like Hearthstone, right? Where you start with a small idea that works and then build it out from there, as opposed to starting big or aiming big. It just not maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 2 years from now they'll announce something completely crazy and big, but it seems to me that they're trending in the direction of continuing to iterate and do things with existing properties that have proven to be extremely successful, and then finding ways to do new things that can become big things elsewhere.
Yeah, I think never is probably too strong a word, but it certainly seems like they're headed in that direction for the time being. I would still love to see that company produce something that did not come from something with the word craft in it, and build something original at some point. Maybe Titan wasn't that game. Maybe it wasn't going to work. I'm just glad they didn't try and launch a Kickstarter for it at some point, because Lord knows, that's something that very easily could have happened in this current market. But I hope somewhere down the road they have the ability to try something outside the realm of what is familiar to them.
Yeah, but it's super interesting that they. It's cool they even talked about it. I mean, I guess they have
Yeah.
to when they've already said, "Hey, we're making this," and then when they're not making it. But also, it's also a little tricky. Like it could be double speak, right? Like it very much could be that they're taking a bunch of stuff from Titan and then going to build something else. But you know, it's a great way to get people to stop asking you about this game you've been working on for 7 years. Say you canceled it.
Yeah. Well, no, that's not true because how many people have been talking about StarCraft Ghost for the last like 8 years?
Oh yeah, but they canceled it, and then who
Yeah,
was
they
asking?
canceled it. But guess what? People keep saying, "Oh, I wish they'd bring it back. I wish they'd try it. I wish they'd
Well,
do it, man."
well, that's why you don't talk about it.
You know what? I saw a build of Ghost. It didn't look that good.
I want that World of Warcraft point-and-click adventure game. Where is it?
Soon. They got
Soon?
Telltale working on that, I'm sure. It's another thing they're
Um,
working on.
don't really have anything else in the news department. There's some, Australia and New Zealand getting the new 3DS in November 21st, which you would imagine that. I don't think that that thing's definitely not coming out here this year. I don't think that would be we're getting awfully close to the deadline on something like that. But I guess it's still possible for a surprise announcement sometime in October. But it seems increasingly likely that we're going to get those early next year.
Yeah, sounds about right.
I always wanted to get a 3D XL. Like I liked the bigger screen. I know some people prefer the smaller one, but I was always waiting for my 3DS to kind of kick the bucket. And although I replaced the battery, my 3DS is just fine now.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll upgrade to that new 3DS XL when that actually comes around.
I got the regular XL for my girlfriend for her birthday, and she cannot go back to the old one. Like
It's a nice screen.
It's a considerable improvement.
Yeah. So what are you up to this weekend?
So this weekend, I'm going to play nothing. I'm going to do nothing.
What?
Sam and I, as soon as this show's over, we are going to head upstate, and we're going to spend the weekend at a cabin in the middle of the woods, staring at trees and grilling meat and doing nothing else. I'm going to unplug from the internet entirely, and it is going to be a magical experience. So I'm going to be totally out of the loop this weekend. I'll be back Monday, but don't come looking for me because you won't find me.
That sounds like a bet.
Yeah, come, go ahead. Try and track me down. Do it. See how well that works for you. I'm going underground, man.
That sounds nice. That sounds like a really pleasant, relaxing weekend.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to go out of town in a very long time that wasn't for a work thing. So I'm gravely looking forward to this.
Did you not bring in a 3DS or anything?
I'm bringing my iPad, so I might play a couple of minor iPad games or something, but I'm not bringing any consoles or anything with me. I'm just going to relax.
I think you would no longer be in a relationship if you're going to a cabin in the woods for the weekend and you brought a console with you.
Yeah, that would be dumb. So I'm not going to do that.
I'm probably going. I'm going to try and steamroll through at least finish the story content in Destiny and finish the story in Danganronpa 2. Both those seem like they're reasonable to pull off this weekend. Based on when the review embargo is for Alien Isolation, I suspect that game is going to show up today. Of course, the thing with playing a game like that is you got to do it at night. You can't play that game during the day. That's ridiculous. So I will probably try and put some time into that tonight, maybe with my wife to kind of get sort of a perspective on how tense it is. But Saturday, so I probably won't get to more of that on Sunday. Not that I'll be able to talk about it until the review embargo is up, I think next Friday. But in any case, I'm looking forward to playing that. I want to know what that is, whether it's good or bad. I have not been this anxious about a video game in a long time. I really, really want it to be good. I love the fact that they're making basically a big budget Amnesia. I don't even know what I'm nervous about. I just really want this game to be awesome.
Yeah, and that's fair, and that's understandable. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on it.
And I can also, I put in the request while we were doing this show, but I can confirm that we will have Lord of the Rings expert Alexa Ray Korea on our show on Monday, so we can have
Excellent.
someone with real knowledge of what the hell is going on with that Tolkien guy. Maybe it'll be a hit. So she didn't review it for Polygon, but my guess is she has played that game, and she put up a phenomenal Lord of the Rings video games retrospective up on Polygon earlier this week, in which not only did she, so they know mostly with retrospectives, it's just like, hey, here are these games, and here's why most of them are terrible.
Here's what people thought of them.
But she actually went and talked to a lot of the developers that worked on those games, and what their experience was grafting Lord of the Rings onto games that weren't, ever designed to be Lord of the Rings games. And it's a great feature. Highly recommend it. But she will be joining us on Monday so that we, instead of just going, hey, here's what these reviews said, we've got someone that knows what they're talking about, which will be refreshing for this show.
Yeah, because Lord knows we never know what we're talking about.
No, definitely not. So we'll change that for a show with a guest, but then don't worry, next Friday we'll revert right back to our normal selves. Programming note. So the Monday show did not have an ad when it went up because there are only certain versions of this show that have been sold an ad. They are usually on Fridays, but not every week on every Friday. So sometimes this show will go up in the premium feed and not in the premium feed. It all depends on if there is an ad, so that we can make sure we keep to our commitment of offering non-ad versions if you are a premium member of the site. So there'll be an ad this week in the audio version, but as always, there will be a stripped version of that in the premium feed if folks want to get a copy of that. So that's it. That's all I got.
Cool.
You go enjoy the woods. Enjoy what it's like to disconnect from this nightmare that we can't wake up from.
That's a great idea. I'll see you later.
Oh, he almost couldn't get that door open. Okay, bye.